Welcome back to Echo Mind Documentaries. If this is your first time here, subscribe, like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. China does not operate like any government you have studied. Power does not rise, it descends. And to understand why China moves the way it does on the world stage, you must first understand the architecture of control that sits at its very center. Every 5 years, a room of fewer than 300 people determines the future of 1.4 billion. No election, no public debate, just a system so precisely layered, so deliberately constructed, that the world watches and still struggles to understand how it works. China is the most populated nation on Earth. It is the second largest economy. It controls one of the most sophisticated military forces in modern history. And yet, the system that governs it remains, to most of the world, largely invisible. To understand China's foreign policy, its economic strategy, or its domestic decisions, you must first understand something deeper. You must understand how power is structured, how decisions are made, how authority flows from the top of a pyramid so carefully built that it has survived revolutions, purges, and the collapse of empires. This is a film about that structure. The People's Republic of China is governed by one entity, not the army, not the courts, not the presidency. The Chinese Communist Party governs China, and everything else operates beneath it. Founded in 1921 and in power since 1949, the party is not simply a political organization. It is the operating system of the Chinese state. The government, the military, the judiciary, the media, and the largest corporations in the country all function within the authority of the party. They do not exist alongside it, they exist beneath it. Understanding this is not optional, it is foundational. When a law is passed in China, a trade deal is signed, a journalist is silenced, or an army unit is deployed, the question is never whether the party approved, the question is which layer of the party gave the order. At the base of party governance sits the National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, nearly 3,000 delegates. They represent party members across the country, from provinces, from the military, from state enterprises. On paper, the National Congress is the highest authority in the party. In practice, it meets only once every 5 years. Its primary function is to formally approve decisions that have already been reached through internal party deliberation. It ratifies rather than debates. It confirms rather than challenges. But it performs one function of enormous consequence. It elects the Central Committee. The Central Committee is composed of roughly 200 full members and an additional 100 alternates. These are senior party officials, provincial governors, military commanders, ministers, heads of major state enterprises. They represent the institutional backbone of Chinese governance. The Central Committee meets in plenary sessions, known as plenums. These sessions, held roughly once per year, are significant events. Major policy directions are announced, personnel decisions are formalized, economic frameworks are established. But even here, most decisions arrive already shaped. The Central Committee is where policy becomes official. It is not, in most cases, where policy is born. That happens one level higher. Above the Central Committee sits the Politburo, 24 members. This is a body of immense power. These are the individuals who run China's most critical portfolios: economic policy, internal security, ideology, foreign affairs, military oversight. The Politburo meets roughly once a month. Its members are not elected by the public. They are selected through a process of internal party consensus, seniority, factional alignment, and the judgment of those already at the top.
To sit on the Politburo is to be among the most powerful 24 people in the most populous nation on Earth. And yet, even here, there is another layer. At the apex of Chinese political power sits the Politburo Standing Committee, currently 7 members, in some eras 9. In the Mao period, the structure was altogether different, but the function has remained constant. These 7 individuals collectively hold more decision-making authority than any comparable group in the world. Each member oversees a specific domain of national governance. Together, they operate by a principle known as collective leadership, a system designed to prevent any single individual from accumulating unchecked personal authority. Decisions at this level are reached through deliberation, through consensus, through a process that is internal, disciplined, and almost entirely opaque to the outside world. Almost. Within the Standing Committee, one position carries authority above the others: the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. This is the paramount leader, the individual who sets the ideological direction, chairs the Politburo Standing Committee, and serves simultaneously as President of the State and Chairman of the Central Military Commission. That concentration of titles is not accidental. It represents the consolidation of party authority, state authority, and military authority in a single figure.
Xi Jinping has held all 3 positions since 2012, and under his leadership, the principle of collective leadership has been substantially reoriented. Constitutional term limits on the presidency were removed in 2018. Xi Jinping thought was enshrined in the party constitution, placing his ideological framework alongside that of Mao Zedong. A level of personal authority not seen since the revolutionary generation had returned to the center of Chinese politics. No discussion of Chinese power is complete without the Central Military Commission. The CMC is the body that commands the People's Liberation Army. It controls the most powerful military force in Asia. Crucially, the CMC answers to the party, not the state. The PLA is not the army of the Chinese government, it is the army of the Chinese Communist Party. This distinction is not semantic. It shapes everything from how military personnel are trained to how the PLA is deployed, to why no civilian court or government ministry can issue commands to a PLA general. The chairman of the CMC is, at present, also the General Secretary. The unification of these roles ensures that the person who leads the party also controls its armed wing, without separation, without institutional check. To understand how a decision actually moves through this system, consider a major economic policy. A proposal may originate in a ministry. It moves upward through state institutions, gathering analysis, revision, and bureaucratic weight. It enters the party apparatus through relevant leading small groups, specialized bodies that coordinate policy across multiple departments. It reaches Politburo members who oversee the relevant domain. It is shaped, negotiated, and refined, and ultimately, if it is significant enough, it arrives before the Standing Committee. There it is decided, and once decided at that level, the decision flows back down through every layer it ascended. The state implements what the party has resolved. The military executes what the commission has authorized. The media communicates what the propaganda department has approved. Nothing moves against this current. That is not an exaggeration. It is a description of how the system was designed to function. The formal structure is only part of the picture. Within the party, informal networks of loyalty and influence shape outcomes as powerfully as any organizational chart. Factions form around shared institutional backgrounds. The Communist Youth League produced one generation of leaders, among them former General Secretary Hu Jintao. Leaders with roots in Shanghai formed another constellation of influence. Xi Jinping's own network traces back through decades of provincial governance and military relationships. These informal alignments do not replace the formal hierarchy. They operate within it and through it. Understanding who a rising official trained under, which province they governed, whose patronage elevated them, is as essential to understanding Chinese politics as reading the official position they hold. The system also maintains itself through enforcement.
The Central Commission for Discipline Investigation is the party's internal law enforcement body. It investigates party members. It can detain, question, and remove officials at any level. It operates largely outside the civilian legal system. Since 2012, Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign has processed over 1 million officials. Critics argue the campaign has simultaneously served as a genuine effort to curb institutional corruption and as a mechanism for removing political rivals. Both can be true. In a system where power and discipline are intertwined, they often are. When China makes a decision that affects the rest of the world, it does not emerge from a parliamentary vote or a presidential press conference. It emerges from this structure. From deliberations inside rooms that foreign governments and intelligence services have spent decades trying to understand. When China builds infrastructure across 3 continents, when it positions its navy in disputed waters, when it responds to a pandemic or imposes sanctions or strikes a trade agreement, the decision passed through this hierarchy. It was shaped by factional dynamics, by ideological frameworks, by the priorities of the Standing Committee, and by the singular vision of the individual who chairs it. To engage with China on any level, whether in diplomacy, in business, in journalism, or in scholarship, without understanding this structure is to navigate a map with half the geography missing.
Power does not announce itself. It does not hold press conferences or publish its reasoning. It builds systems. It designs structures that outlast individuals, that absorb disruption, that continue functioning through transition and upheaval and change. China's leadership system is one of the most enduring political architectures in the modern world. It has survived the death of its founder, the violence of the Cultural Revolution, the economic shocks of market reform, and the pressures of a rising global order that did not expect it to succeed. It succeeded because it was built not around individuals, but around a structure that concentrates authority without centralizing it entirely, that distributes power without ever truly decentralizing it, that moves slowly until it does not. And that, more than any leader or policy or proclamation, is what shapes the world you live in today.